Hello, my name is Brad Carliff. I'm the president of the John Reich Collectors Society. We are collectors who specialize in early gold and silver coins minted before the Liberty Seated series. Our club includes both beginners and recognized experts in the field who are happy to share their knowledge with everyone. Here are a few of our members who will explain more about collecting our coins by die marriage.
I'm Richard. I'll be talking about half dimes.
I'm Jim, and I'll be talking about dimes.
I'm Glenn. I'll be talking about bust quarters.
I'm Garrett. I'll be talking about half dollars.
And I'm David. I'll be talking about the silver dollars, but first back to Brad for some more background information.
The John Reich Collectors Society held their first general membership meeting at the 1986 ANA convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We now hold our annual meeting each summer at the ANA convention and also meet at the Winter Fun Show in Florida. All meetings include an educational presentation. Many JRCS members collect early U.S. silver coins by die marriage. These coins were made using an obverse and a reverse die. A die marriage is the unique combination of these two dies. They were handmade, so each was slightly different. So even though each series has the same basic design, each die marriage is distinctive. Here is an example of die marriages using an 1805 half dollar. The obverse die was first paired with this reverse die to create a unique die marriage T10. These coins were struck on a screw press, which took its toll on the individual dies. This obverse die failed, so they took it out of service and replaced it with another die that was slightly different. This created a new die marriage T11, which consisted of the same reverse die paired with the new obverse die. This new obverse die was overdated and has a 5 punched over a 4 in the date. We will bring back the original obverse to show it was not overdated. In a few minutes, you will hear about the reference books that identify the die marriages for each series. Now, we will take a look at why the first obverse die in our example had to be replaced by discussing die states. A die state is a specific point in the life of a die characterized by the deterioration shown on the coin. The coin on the left is an earlier die state produced about midway through the life of this die. Notice, there is nothing unusual at stars 10 to 12. However, after constant use, a die would wear out and sometimes crack. In rare instances, a cud would form on the coin, as shown on the coin on the right at stars 10 to 12. This was caused by a piece of the die breaking and falling away, which allowed the metal to flow into the void, leaving the full cud. This die was no longer usable and was replaced with the overdated obverse die you previously saw to produce the T11 die marriage. The obverse of this die marriage eventually suffered a similar fate. These images show the progression of the obverse die failure. On the left, there is a light crack from Miss Liberty's nose to star 8. The coin on the right shows a failing die with a larger die crack at the nose and a triangular cud at stars 1 to 2. There are many JRCS members who revere late die states with their problems. As mentioned, this presentation will focus specifically on the 5 denominations of early U.S. silver coins. As you can see, the metal specification for each of these denominations is approximately 90% silver and 10% copper. Our next speaker, Richard, will provide more information about the smallest denomination, early U.S. half dimes.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about early United States half dimes, and we're going to review the design types. First type, flowing here, half dimes. You can see information on those right here with some really nice pictures. These are half dimes I cannot afford. Further on the half dimes I cannot afford theme, Draped bust small eagle half dimes. And then the Heraldic eagle half dimes follow those. And then after a period between 1805 and 1829 where half dimes were not produced, then we have the cap bust half dimes. This is where the majority of the mintage of half dimes occurred. I call it the Bible of half dimes is Federal Half Dimes 1792 to 1837, written by Russell Logan and John McCloskey. It's a wonderful book that talks about not only the basic years of production, but also the methods that were used to produce the half dimes, and also provides pictures of the varieties of the half dimes. You get an idea of some of the prices, as you heard me say earlier that I really can't afford these really early half dimes. You can see you can spend well over, well, if you had an even higher grade half dime, you could spend well over $10,000 for one of these coins. I prefer the cap bust half dimes with much more affordable rates, as this chart will demonstrate. I wanted to spend a minute or two talking about how I envision a good way to start in cap bust half dimes. When I started, my goal was to have one half dime from each year, 1829 to 1837, and I looked for coins that were around $300 to $350. And after I started my set, that's when I discovered that book, Federal Half Dimes from 1792 to 1837, that's when I discovered that book. And I learned that, yeah, there were nine coins I needed for the collection, but there were varieties, different dyes used to produce different coins, and if I wanted to expand my collection, I could pursue every single one of those varieties, which is now 92. We call them die marriages. So what began in earnest as a 9-coin, say $3,000 effort, turned into a 92-coin pursuit. So there's a number of ways that you can collect cap bust half dimes. You can collect raw coins, put them in an album, looks great. You can collect them in holders by PCGS or NGC or Annex, and those will look great. And you can try collecting by Red Book variety. You can try collecting by the book, 1792 to 1837 half dimes. The best way to start collecting is get the book, read about it, maybe get a Red Book, see the pictures, buy the coins that you like. Join the John Reich Collectors Society, ask friends. I think you'll really enjoy it. I know I have. I've been pursuing them now for about 15 years. Next up is Jim, who will be talking about dimes.
Thank you, Richard, for their talk on half dimes. It was very fascinating. My name is Jim. I'm going to be talking about early United States dimes. These were minted from 1796 to 1837, and there are 4 major design types. The first one is the Draped bust small eagle dimes. These began to be issued in the year 1796, and the obverse depicts the draped bust design, where Liberty is facing right with just her bust, as well as a beautiful ribbon in her hair. The reverse has a small eagle that's surrounded by a palm branch as well as a laurel branch, joined together in a ribbon at the base with a small eagle standing inside on some fluffy, nice clouds. They were only issued for 2 years in 1796 and 1797. There are 3 Red Book varieties, and there's also 9 known different die marriages of that style. The second style began in 1798. These were the Draped bust Heraldic eagle dimes. The same obverse continues in use with the Draped bust of Liberty facing right. The reverse has the Great Seal of the United States adapted somewhat to fit on the size of a coin, where you have an eagle with its wings outstretched, arrows in the right claw, and the olive branch of peace in the left, 13 stars normally over the eagle, and the clouds above, surrounded by the legend United States of America. For the Draped bust dimes with the Heraldic eagle, there were 8 different dates that these were struck, 13 different Red Book varieties, and there's 22 known die marriages. These are tend to be very expensive coins, both the small eagle and the Draped bust Heraldic eagle coins, but they are available in all different grades, and this series is one of the most difficult to collect of all this early silver series. There are just so few nice coins and so few really available coins. Many of them are quite rare if you do the die varieties. Others are comparatively common and are purchased mostly for type coins by many collectors. One of the most interesting coins that came out of this period was a blundered die, and it was probably made in 1798, but the die sat on the shelf until 1804. The engraver miscounted the stars and put in 14 over the eagle on the reverse. This was the only instance in where a die had 14 stars on it in the entire dime series, and that was only struck in the year 1804. Interestingly, the dime size of 22 millimeters was the same exact size as the quarter eagle, and those dies were shared back and forth for the reverses because there was no denomination noted on the coin itself, so that the reverse dies are known from being used in both the dimes as well as the quarter eagles. There was an excellent study done on that early on in the 1980s when the original dime book came out, and then a collector named Ed Price studied that even further and formed a great collection of both dimes and quarter eagles showing the back and forth usage of these dies and how they continued use all through the Heraldic eagle period. The open color cap bust dimes began to be struck in 1809 and went through 1828. This is the John Reich design of Liberty facing left with a small eagle on the reverse, and there are 11 different dates, 19 red book varieties, and 56 known die marriages. One of the most blundered dies that I've always enjoyed is the reverse, where the words States of America were run together as a single word. We have a nice picture of one of them here. This die was used both in 1814 and then again in 1820. These aren't terribly expensive, but they're very interesting because they show the hand engraving, if you will, on these dies, and that gives them a lot of character. And this is a good example of a run-on mistake, if you will, and these are quite popular with collectors. The last group of the dimes are the closed collar cap bust dimes. These came out in 1828 and were struck through 1837. There's 9 different dates, 17 red book varieties, and 67 known die marriages. The book on the United States dimes came out in 1984. It's the standard reference to this day, but it's been out of print for a while. Since then, a new bust dime reference came out about 3 or 4 years ago now. It has updated information that's quite wonderful. It is still available. Winston Zach spearheaded that project, and everyone who collects bust dimes, I'd highly recommend getting a copy of this. Thank you very much, and next up is Glenn, who will be talking about bust quarters.
Thank you, Jim, for your interesting talk about bust dimes. I will talk today about early U.S. quarters. They're minted from 1796 to 1838. By die marriage, there's a total of 97 altogether for all the design types. The first design type is the Draped bust small eagle reverse, minted in 1796. There's just one date, but there's 2 die marriages. Collectors like to collect them by the die marriages to get a complete set of these coins. But many other people may just start with a date collection and then proceed from there. The second group is the Draped bust Heraldic eagle quarters from 1804 to 1807. These beautiful coins have 4 dates, 5 red book varieties, and 19 known die marriages, with some very interesting coins with cuds, breaking the die around the edges. That is very collectible. The third group is the large diameter cap bust quarters, minted from 1815 to 1828. There's 11 dates, 16 red book varieties, and they're very collectible. We should note that the bust quarters tend to be a little bit more costly than the other series, but they're a very beautiful series of coin to collect, so I encourage people to be collecting them. The final group is the reduced diameter cap bust quarters from 1831 to 1838, and these are a bit less expensive and a little bit different design than the previous design of the quarters. There are 2 current references for the early quartered dollars. The first one being Steve Tompkins, self-published a reference for the die marriage of early quarters. Both of the references continue to use the B numbers as per the Browning, the original source of material on the bust quarters. The next one is Early Quarter Dollars of the United States Mint with authors Rory Ray, Glenn Peterson, Bradley Karloff, and John Kovac. And this has the B numbers to identify the various varieties and a very accurate census of known pieces for each of those die marriages. The early quarters, as you can see, are very expensive in 1796 and the 1804 to 7. Less expensive in the middle years, 15 to 28 and 31 to 38, where they become very collectible. There's some very interesting overdates. There's an 1806 over 5, 1818 over 5, 1823 over 2, 24 over 2, and 25 over 4 and 2, and 27 over 3 and 2. Very interesting when they kept using those dies. The reverse shows a very interesting variety of 1819 with the 5 and the 25C denomination doubled. And in 1822 and 1828, it's 25 over 5 and over 50. There are some great rarities here. The 1821 B6, just 6 known. The new discovery was the 1822 B3 is still unique as far as we know. And the 1823, 35 known. The 1827, the original was just 9 known and restrike some years later, 16 known, and actually struck in different metals in silver and copper. Finally, the 1837 B6, just 3 known. The large diameter quarters have a very interesting addition. There was an E and an L overstamped on the coin, and these coins surfaced in the 1870s, and we don't know exactly what caused this disturbance. We do know it's not made in the die because recent research disproves this theory. Possibilities: it was English and Latin awards in a school, or a settlement of a planter's bank discrepancy, and they continue to be researched these days. Last couple slides are of a very high value coin. The 1823 diameter cap bust quarter is pictured here, and the 1827 B1 original is pictured here. Thank you for your attention, and I'd like now to turn over the microphone to Garrett to talk about early half dollars.
Thank you, Glenn. I really liked your talk on quarters, and I will be talking about early U.S. half dollars. So there are 4 design types for the early U.S. half dollars. The first one's the flowing hair. It was minted for 2 years. There's 4 red book varieties as well as 42 die marriages. The second type is the Draped bust small eagle. This one was minted from 1796 to 97, so also for 2 years. There's 3 red book varieties, and then there's 4 known die marriages. And as you may know, this is a rare type, and there's slightly over 200 specimens known for this type. The third type is the Draped bust heraldic eagle. This one was minted for 6 dates. There's 15 red book varieties, as well as 62 known die marriages. One of the reference books that covers these 3 design types is Early United States Half Dollars 1794 to 1807. This book was written by Steve Tompkins, and it contains high-quality photographs, die marriage attribution points, along with extensively researched production information. A second reference for these 3 design types is Early Half-Dollar Die Varieties, 1794 to 1836. This book is commonly known as the Overton book after its original author, Al Overton. Al Overton used O numbers to identify the die marriages of the half-dollar series, and his book also details the 4th design type, which is cap bust half dollars. The cap bust half dollars were minted from 1807 to 1836 for 29 years, and half dollars dated 1816 were not produced because of a mint fire that destroyed some of the equipment that was used to produce the silver and the gold coins. In total, the mint pumped out more than 80 million of the cap bust half dollars, and there's 450 known die marriages, which is a record. Half dollar was also the largest silver coin that was in circulation at that time, and it was a financial workhorse for bank transactions, which makes it similar to the $100 bill today. This example on the slide is the overdated 1815/2 half dollar, And this is a key date in the series, and it also has the lowest mintage in the series. And this was because of a shortage of silver after the War of 1812. One of the more famous bust tabs is the 1807 bearded goddess that's pictured here. It's a late die state of the 1807 0111 half dollar, and it has a crack that connects Miss Liberty's chin to her chest, and it resembles a beard. The near terminal die state is quite rare, and there's only 31 to 80 specimens known. A second cap bust half dollar reference is the Ultimate Guide to Attributing Bust Half Dollars. This book was written by Glenn Peterson, and it provides detailed images as well as drawings and die marriage attribution points, and many of these cannot be found elsewhere. If you would prefer an online resource for the early half dollars, then you should check out Dave's Bust Half Dollar site. So let's take a look at the type pricing for the 3 earliest designs. What you notice right away are the high prices for the Draped bust small eagle due to their rarity. The flowing hair are less expensive, but they're still out of the price range of most collectors. The Draped bust heraldic eagle is the least expensive of the group, and it's roughly a quarter of the price of a flowing hair in the same grade. In contrast, the cap bust half dollars are more affordable. With the exception of the rarer 1815/2 and a few select die marriages, grades up to XF40 can be found in the sub $500 range. Even if you have a limited budget, it's still possible to collect a cap bust half dollars. I started collecting them 6 years ago, and initially I targeted half dollars that were graded fine or very fine, and also ones minted later in the series, because they're more affordable. Once I got a steadier job, I was able to focus more on the half dollars graded very fine and sometimes XF. Of course, when you're collecting on a limited budget, there's many beautiful bust halves that unfortunately are out of your price range. However, there's also advantages to collecting bust halves on a limited budget. For example, the stakes are much lower if you make a purchasing error. Also, whether you have a small or a large budget, it's important to learn as much as you can about the cap bust half dollars before you start collecting them. Studying the reference books and joining the JRCS are 2 great ways that you can get the solid educational base. So thank you, and up next is Dave, who will talk about early U.S. dollars.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm David, and I'm going to be talking about the early United States silver dollars that were dated 1794 to 1803. As you'll see in a second, there are 3 distinct design types. The first is called the flowing hair. You've got Liberty with flowing hair, curls, and different iterations of that. And then the reverse has a eagle with a wreath and everything. There's 2 dates, 1794 and 95. Most people, if they want just one of the type, will collect the 95 because it's a lot less expensive. But there are 2 different dates. There's 5 red book varieties, 20 known die marriages, and that's our first type. Second is called the Draped bust small eagle dollars, and they were minted from late 1795 to 1798. There are 4 different dates, so 1795, 6, 7, and 8. 10 red book varieties, 13 known die marriages. The third type is the Draped bust heraldic eagle silver dollar. These were struck from 1798 to 1803. There's 26 varieties of these in the red book, different features from the obverse and the reverse, number of arrows, narrow dates, wide dates, etc. And then there's 87 known die marriages today. The early dollars were first classified by the obverse die and reverse die combinations in 1881 by John Hazeltine of Philadelphia, a dealer. And it was actually the work of John Hazeltine and J. Colvin Randall, but Hazeltine kind of published it on his own and left Randall out. That spurred some collectors to collect by the die combinations. In 1950, Milford Bolender of Illinois came out with his book, The United States Early Silver Dollars from 1794 to 1803, and it had plates or photos of the different coins. The Hazeltine type table did not, therefore it was very difficult to know which one you had in some cases. Jules River was a noted collector of all the different series you've heard on this video, and had a collection with about 200 silver dollars in it, all the different die combinations except for about 3 at the end. In 1993, David Bowers and Mark Borchardt came out with the Silver Dollars of the United States. It included other dowers like Gobrecht dowers, seated dowers, trade dowers, Morgan and Peace dowers, but there was a section on the early dowers, and this used larger photos, 2x size, and made it easier to classify them than the Bolander book and the plates that were in that. And then a few years ago, a revised edition came out with color plates, some updates, and that. So to collect the dowers, do you need a reference? You can go back to the beginning of the slides and say a simple set would be just one coin. I just want one old silver dower. You can also collect the 3 distinct types, which is popular in any grade you like. So you can get a flowing hair dower, a draped bust small eagle, and a draped bust heraldic eagle dower and have a 3-piece typeset. And then the most sophisticated would be using the 2 references you see in front of me to collect by every die combination. And today there's 120 different combinations of the obverse and reverse dies. And that would be an extremely challenging set, both financially and the fact that about 5 of those combinations are unique, so only one collector can own them at any one time. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed learning about early U.S. silver coinage from various members of our club. If you would like to learn more about the John Reich Collectors Society, please visit our website at jrcs.org. You can download a membership application directly from the website. Dues are $25 a year, and in return, you will receive 3 issues of the John Reich Journal, the official club publication. The journal contains articles detailing interesting collecting stories, research papers, and censuses, to name a few. Back issues of the JRJ can be found on the Newman Numismatic portal at www.nnp.wustl.edu. The JRCS also supports an official weekly e-newsletter called the JR Newsletter and can be found at jr-newsletter.blogspot.com. It's free to anyone and contains information on upcoming events and new discoveries. It also allows members to keep in touch on a more regular and informal basis. Please consider signing up for the JR Newsletter at jrnewsletter@gmail.com.